After my husband was disciplined, his monthly salary dropped to 3,000 yuan. I took on 2 jobs to support the family and pay off the mortgage. But then I discovered that his payslip showed a monthly salary of 30,000 yuan. Today is Qixi Festival, and David, as usual, gave me a good morning kiss. Honey, the boss said I've been performing well lately and that I can redeem myself. In the evening, his first love posted a photo of a property deed in a large riverside apartment. Who received the most thoughtful Qixi gift? The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected David's face, full of affection. How wonderful. I'll make sure to like each post in my friend's circle. I can give my blessings. But as for the house, you won't spend a single day in it. Chapter 1. Before doing the laundry, I emptied David's pockets and found a crumpled-up payslip, standing at the wash basin, still wearing gloves. I was stunned. David's salary is 30,000 yuan per month? How is that possible? Panicking, I quickly checked the record of the 2,000 yuan he transferred to me for living expenses this month. Honey, I only keep 1,000 yuan for myself. It's all my fault for being so useless. My heart raced wildly as I read it over and over again in disbelief. Name, David. Net salary, 30,192. 5 years ago, he came home in tears, telling me that he had made a mistake and was disciplined by the company, with his salary reduced to 3,000 yuan, from 10,000 to 3,000. I spent sleepless nights bearing this terrible news, constantly comforting him and looking for a second job. I took off the rubber gloves. My rough, water-soaked hands could hardly be recognized as the one soft hands I used to have. For the past 5 years, I've worked 2 jobs, paying off the car loan and mortgage, and supporting this family. But now you're telling me it was all my husband's lie? I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be a surprise or a shock. The phone rang. It was David. In a panic, I wiped away my tears, trying to steady my trembling voice before answering the call. Honey, I'm entertaining the boss today, so I won't be coming home for dinner. You know my situation. I need to perform well. His voice was calm and as usual. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. All right. My mind was in chaos, and I didn't remind him like I usually do. There was a brief pause on the other end before he hung up. David's dirty clothes were still soaking in the basin. I sat on the bed, waiting to confront him when he got home, but he didn't come back. Even late into the night, I picked up my phone, only to see a new post from Anna on her social media. Who received the most thoughtful Qixi gift? In the photo, she's holding a property deed, lounging on a luxurious sofa in a large riverside apartment, reflected in the floor-to-ceiling glass. I saw my husband, David, holding up his phone with a doting smile. Chapter 2. My trembling hands caused the phone to slip from my grasp and fall to the floor. The sharp pain from pinching my thigh was a desperate attempt to remind myself that this wasn't a dream. David had deceived me with a fake salary for 5 years just to avoid giving me money for living expenses. Now, he's used that money to buy a house for his first love, Anna. I quickly scrolled through Anna's social media posts, realizing that over the years, she had openly flaunted their relationship. On the days when David was supposedly on business trips, Anna's boyfriend was accompanying her on vacations. When David claimed to be working overtime, Anna's boyfriend was preparing candlelight dinners for her. And even on that winter day when I was too sick to see a doctor, Anna was showing off her boyfriend's 150,000 yuan year-end bonus and her numerous luxury shopping bags. The hand holding those bags wore the same watch that David always wore. It was the wedding gift I had bought him with my hard-earned money. There was no mistaking it. I lay on the bed, my entire body cold. The countless cuts on my hands, cracked and dry, were itching and burning, as tears rolled down my cheeks and into my ears. The tears felt just as cold. In the middle of the night, David came home. Unusually, I hadn't left a light on for him and was already lying down facing the wall. He softly called out to me, "Honey," but I didn't want to respond, so I pretended to be asleep. David tried to hold me, but the scent of lychee and rose perfume filled my nose, making me nauseous. I accidentally pushed his hand away and pretended to fall back asleep. David hesitated for a moment before lying down next to me, but the sound of him tossing and turning didn't stop. Neither of us could sleep. The faint light from his phone screen illuminated the room as he unlocked it. Usually, after finishing my 2 jobs, I would sleep so deeply that nothing could wake me up. That's why he didn't bother keeping his voice down while listening to voice messages. David, did you really buy Anna a house? Damn. It was his close friend, Joseph. My heart sank as I strained to listen, painfully confirming what I feared. You always said your wife controls the money. Where did you get the money, man? Yes. 5 years ago. I used to ask him for 8,000 yuan each month because the mortgage and car loan alone were 7,000 yuan, and he contributed 1,000 yuan for living expenses. I covered the rest. But he grew increasingly impatient and even had a big fight with me. That month, when he handed over the money, he didn't say anything. I thought he had finally understood and appreciated how hard I was working. But the next month, he told me his salary was only 3,000 yuan. Thanks to your idea back then, I lied to my wife that I was disciplined, and my salary was reduced to 3,000 yuan a month. I told her I had to give her 2,500 yuan, and she felt so sorry for me that she only asked for 2,000. After that, I got control of my own money, and I could spend it however I wanted. Joseph's voice was filled with envy. What about that house you bought for Anna? I saved for 2 years. She was dumped by her idiot ex-husband and came crying to me. You know, she's the love of my life. I can't stand to see her suffer. Joseph quickly responded. What about your wife? Aw, she's willing to support me, so let her keep dreaming. She can't live without me, so I'll just keep her in the dark. Chapter 3. I couldn't hear what they were saying anymore. My vision was completely blurred, and my heart was pounding so fast that it felt like my eardrums were pulsing. The love of his life is Anna? Then what am I? Was it that he stopped loving me long ago? Or did he never love me at all? I pressed hard on my chest, taking deep breaths, but I didn't dare make a sound. After all, when I met David, he was deeply in love with Anna. When I transferred to No. 1 high school, the entire campus knew the story of the top student David and the school beauty Anna. I just didn't know when the rumor started that the real school beauty was the transfer student, Caroline. For 2 whole years, I was isolated by the girls in my grade. Malicious gossip was like knives stabbing me, making those years the darkest of my life. After the college entrance exams, Anna was sent abroad, and they broke up, but I ended up at the same university as David. He was in despair, and I was depressed. We were like 2 wounded animals licking each other's wounds, carefully avoiding each other's pain, and gently embracing. David shifted his love for Anna onto me. He accompanied me to see a therapist, took me on trips to see beautiful places, and gave me affirmation and warmth whenever I needed it. David was my light. So, I fell hopelessly in love with him. We got married right after graduation. I didn't ask for a penny of dowry and used my part-time earnings to buy him a watch. Back then, my wedding ring was just a silver band that cost less than 100 yuan. We bought a house, bought a car. I quit my job to take care of him, managing his meals and daily life, and often took care of his parents. I was immersed in the eternal love he wove for me, firmly believing that life would get better and better, and I would never abandon him in his difficult times. But in the end, he said I was the one lost in the dream of supporting him, that I was nothing more than a parasitic vine that couldn't live without him. So-called love, so-called hardships, it was all a lie. How could there ever be something eternal? 5 years nearly wore me down beyond recognition. And David? He's glowing with health, with a beauty in his arms, in the places I couldn't see. He was living a life of luxury. Did he ever think about me, who didn't even have time to wipe the sweat off my brow? I should have realized earlier that only I can keep saving myself. The love and life he refused to give me, I can still give to myself. Chapter 4. In the morning, I turned off my 5 a.m. alarm. David was still sound asleep in bed. Usually, by this time, I would have already made breakfast and left it warming on the stove before heading out for my housekeeping job. But today, I didn't step into the kitchen at all. Instead, I carefully washed up and dressed myself. The woman in the mirror was only 28, but the fine lines around her eyes and rough skin made her look at least 10 years older. Due to exhaustion and poor nutrition, my body had become frail and thin. David, still groggy, stumbled into the bathroom and was shocked when he saw me. Honey, You haven't left yet? Time may leave no trace, but it certainly hasn't favored me. At 28, David still looked like his 18-year-old self, tall, handsome, and full of youthful energy. I realized it wasn't that time was unkind, but that David was unkind. No work today. I stubbornly applied moisturizer to my face, while David snickered behind me. Come on, no matter how much you put on, you won't go back to being 18. His eyes held disdain and ridicule, but there was no pity. Of course, I couldn't go back. Anna uses skincare products that cost thousands per bottle, while I'm stuck with a 10 yuan jar of toner. How could I compare? I couldn't be bothered to respond, so I turned and walked out. David muttered behind me, ugly and bad-tempered. Can't even play along. I went for a 3-kilometer run, gasping for breath by the time I reached the office. Caroline, not cutting it close today? My boss teased me when we happened to meet in the break room, but I felt a pang of bitterness. It wasn't easy to find a job I liked, but in my pursuit of money, I had exhausted myself to the point of not being able to do the things I wanted most. In the end, it was all for nothing. It won't happen again, Bess. I'm going to give my best at work from now on. She was momentarily surprised but then smiled and patted my shoulder. Just as I sat down at my desk, I received a call from David. Caroline, why is my shirt still soaking in the water? Didn't I tell you I need to wear it for a meeting today? So, it turns out that the moment something doesn't go his way, his true nature shows. If you needed it, why didn't you wash it yourself? I hung up the phone, just wanting to focus on my work. I worked 2 extra hours before leaving the office. On my way home, I passed by a mall I hadn't stepped into for 5 years. Clutching my phone, I slowly walked inside. I picked out a set of skincare products that suited me, and the store clerk helped me try on some makeup. I looked at the unfamiliar yet distant reflection of myself in the mirror. It turns out I didn't need to wear myself down. It turns out I could be beautiful too. Your skin is really nice, sis, the clerk said. Girls should treat themselves well. Look how pretty you are. Her sweet words made my eyes well up, and I ended up buying a whole set of cosmetics to take home. She offered to help me remove the makeup, but I smiled and declined. So when I got home, David saw me and looked as if he didn't recognize me at first. But soon enough, anger flared in his eyes. Caroline, you got all dolled up like this to do housekeeping work? Who are you trying to seduce? I've called you so many times. Why didn't you answer? Who's out there with you? Chapter 5. Of course I couldn't answer the phone while working. I carried the things I had bought into the guest room and started moving my belongings there as well. Caroline, are we still living together or what? Do you even realize our financial situation? Why are you wasting money on these useless things? And who are you trying to scare with that garish makeup? He picked up the skincare products I bought and scolded me loudly. I set down my bedding and clothes, then snatched the items from his hands. What's wrong? Can't I take care of myself? How many ties and suits have you bought? And how much have you spent? I pushed him out of the room, unwilling to tolerate his double standards. That's for business. You know that. I made a mistake and need to make up for it. I slammed the door shut, not wanting to listen to his lies anymore. Caroline. Soon after, I heard the sound of a door slamming from outside. He was probably going to give me the silent treatment. Every time he thought I was being unreasonable, he'd start a cold war with me. And when he made a mistake, he'd try to guilt-trip me. How childish. So childish it made me sick. His departure was actually perfect timing. The next couple of weeks passed by peacefully for me. I ate well, slept well, and my work efficiency improved. My overall state of being was transformed. Like a complete rebirth. It turns out that confidence and a positive mindset are truly the best beauty treatments for a woman. One weekend, I was at home alone, relaxing with a face mask and a book, when suddenly there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find none other than Anna, who I hadn't seen in a long time, standing there at my doorstep. Anna took off her sunglasses and brazenly looked me up and down, noticing my loose-fitting pajamas. Caroline, right? I heard from some classmates that you haven't been doing well these past few years, so I came over to check on you. She was carrying a box of Shine Muscat grapes, and the bag slung over her shoulder. worth tens of thousands, was also a gift from her boyfriend. Before I could say anything, she walked in on her own and started inspecting the entire house. Caroline, I heard you've been working 2 jobs lately. You need to be careful not to wear yourself out. Aging can happen quickly. I peeled off my face mask and watched her put on a show. But when she saw my plump, rosy skin, clearly more vibrant even if not perfectly smooth, and my upright posture, she couldn't find a trace of the exhaustion she had expected. Anna's smile faltered slightly, and she forced a laugh. Did you secretly get some cosmetic treatments? I could see the flash of envy in her eyes. Not at all, I replied. I've just been feeling great lately, more relaxed. And it seems to be making me look younger. And what about you, Anna? I heard you married a British executive after going abroad. Your life must be much better than mine. I deliberately poked at her sore spot. That executive was abusive, not only cheating her out of her money but also frequently beating her, which is why she fled back to China to find David. Only David would be eager to pick up someone else's discarded trash. Anna's eyes flashed with anger, and her face twisted for a moment in rage, but she quickly recovered and smiled again. It's important to look toward the future. Just look at your place. The lighting isn't great, the location is bad, and it's not very spacious. You know, my boyfriend just bought me a new apartment, 150 square meters, with a river view. I'll have to invite you over sometime. I thought I had become strong enough, but her words were like sharp knives, cutting into my wounds, causing them to bleed all over again. Is that so? I forced a bitter smile. Anna only became more smug. The boyfriend I'm seeing, you know him too. We're all old classmates. Look, he's home. The door opened, and David walked in as usual. Chapter 6. Baby, you're here. Anna called out affectionately to David, who had just started to change his shoes, but his movements suddenly froze. He turned his head stiffly, seeing both Anna and me sitting together, his face turning ashen. He even looked like he wanted to immediately open the door and walk out again. Honey, you're back from work. He couldn't muster a smile. His face was full of panic, and sweat seemed to be forming on his forehead. Anna glanced at me, full of triumph, and then got up and ran towards David, throwing herself into his arms with a coquettish look. But David, with a grim expression, pushed her away and sat down on the couch again. After all, showing off as the mistress in front of the wife, Anna must have left her brain behind when she went abroad. David, what's the meaning of this? Don't you love me anymore? Shut up! He snapped at her viciously. Anna trembled slightly, but when she saw my trembling hands, her smugness returned. Caroline, this is my boyfriend, David. He's been so good to me. As you can see, she must be referring to the gifts and the house she's been flaunting on social media over the years. David, bringing your mistress into our home, is this the surprise you had for me? I ignored Anna and focused solely on David. He stood there, his face paling slightly. He probably hadn't expected to be exposed so quickly. Was he afraid? Maybe he felt guilty? The one who isn't loved is the mistress. David and I are childhood sweethearts, and we were each other's first love. You were the one who intruded on our relationship. She was indeed brazen, and her words made my lips turn white with anger. Intruded on their relationship? My heart trembled uncontrollably, but I didn't want to cry, didn't want to make myself any more pathetic. Honey, let me explain, David said, pulling me into the bedroom. His brows furrowed as he looked at me. I stumbled as I was dragged inside, and the moment I regained my balance, I slapped him hard across the face. Explain what? What the hell do you need to explain? Explain how your salary has been 30,000 yuan a month for the past 5 years? Or that Anna is the love of your life, that you bought her gifts and a house, and every time you said you were on a business trip or entertaining clients, you were actually in her bed? David, what kind of trash are you? Making your wife work 2 jobs just to spend money on your mistress. Tears streamed down my face as I cursed David, but I was also cursing myself for being so weak. David was stunned by my words. Honey, you know everything? I didn't mean to deceive. Get out! Everything that comes out of your mouth is a lie. You just don't want to take care of this family. So let's end it, divorce. Looking at his face, I felt nothing but disgust. Was he really going to use another lie as an excuse? I didn't want to hear it anymore. David's expression completely changed. His face grew cold, and he looked down at me with a condescending gaze. Caroline, how can you be so selfish? Did you marry me just for my money? Why should I give you 8,000 yuan out of my 10,000 yuan salary every month? You're so greedy. You don't understand how hard it is for me to earn this money. I just wanted you to experience my difficulties. And you dare to insult me? I don't know why you've become such a shrew. Do you know why I stopped loving you? Take a look in the mirror at yourself. I stood there, stunned by his words, tears falling to the ground. I couldn't understand. How could he think this way? I'm a gold digger? I didn't take a single cent as a dowry. I paid off the car loan and mortgage for 5 years. Only to be called a gold digger. In the living room, David made no attempt to hide as he wrapped his arm around Anna's waist and kissed her on the lips. To my surprise, I felt nothing in my heart. Anna turned back to look at me with immense satisfaction, and as they walked out the door, she smiled and called out to me, Caroline, you're the mistress, got it? It turns out that the deepest despair comes when the heart dies. Chapter 7. In the days that followed, David didn't come home even once. I felt relieved, praised by my supervisor. I was promoted to team leader, with a salary increase, making life even easier. I found a lawyer and had a divorce agreement drafted, just waiting for David to come home and sign it. With my bonus, I treated myself to a few new dresses. The woman in the mirror still had a slightly yellowish complexion, but it was like a golden glow from the sun. But since David was still nowhere to be seen, I didn't want to waste any more time, so I took the initiative to contact him. In the cafe, he dressed simply yet luxuriously, with a different watch on his wrist. Perhaps now that I knew about his hidden salary, he didn't feel the need to keep pretending. Here? He slid the coffee he had ordered for me across the table, but when he looked up at me, his eyes lit up. There was greed and a hint of daze in David's eyes as he smiled, the sunlight casting a glow on him, making him look like the young man he once was. Honey, you know, when you dress up, you're still quite beautiful. You realize you were wrong, don't you? I admit I was harsh that day, but you really hurt me. From now on, I can give you 5,000 yuan a month for living expenses, and you won't need to work anymore. The way he said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, left me wondering where he got his confidence. I took the divorce agreement out of my bag. No need. I'm here to finalize our divorce. David's smile vanished instantly. He took the divorce papers from my hand, his face stern. Caroline, are you really going to be this ungrateful? I smiled faintly and quietly took a sip of my coffee. He flipped through the divorce papers carelessly, but when he saw that the house and car were to be mine, and that he was required to give me a sum of money, his expression darkened. He slammed the papers on the table and looked at me with a mocking smile. Caroline, have you lost your mind over money? Fine, we can get divorced. But don't think you'll get a single cent. I've supported you for so many years, giving you 8,000 yuan every month. And now you want to take my house? Dream on. I sneered. David, did you forget that we bought this house together after we got married? That we've been paying off the mortgage together? And using our joint assets to buy a house for your mistress? I think you've really overindulged and should give it back. Stop calling her a mistress. Anna is our friend too. You wouldn't be so cruel as to leave her homeless, would you? I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. Anna has parents and a family. What does her being homeless have to do with me? Are you so kind-hearted that you want to buy a house for everyone without one? David, you and Anna really are a perfect match. You should hurry up and get married. His grip on the coffee cup tightened, his knuckles turning white as he stared at me. Caroline, don't even think about it. I won't sign the papers. I told you. I'm just helping her through a tough time. Out of old feelings. I couldn't be bothered to listen to his hypocritical excuses anymore. I gathered my things and stood up to leave. Do as you like. If you won't agree, I'll take it to court. This divorce is happening sooner or later. Chapter 8. I contacted the lawyer again and spent this period gathering David's bank statements and evidence of his infidelity. Suddenly, I received a call from David's mother. Caro, Come over for a bit. Your father accidentally fell and hurt himself. David is busy with work and doesn't have time. You need to come back and take care of him for a few months. I sneered inwardly. David busy with work. He always has time to go shopping and have fun with Anna, but no time to take care of his own mother? And with a salary of over 30,000 yuan, he can't afford to hire a caregiver? They just think my job is dispensable and treat me as their free maid. I didn't want to give them any excuses to criticize me, so I agreed. The old lady hung up the phone with a smug look. I bought a box of health supplements and drove to my mother-in-law's house. Father-in-law had indeed fallen and was now lying in bed watching TV, while mother-in-law sat beside him snacking on sunflower seeds. Seeing me arrive with gifts in hand, her face lit up with joy. Caro, go pour some water for your dad and then make dinner. Oh right. The guest room is quite messy. Clean it up so you can stay here for the next few months. I looked at the kitchen sink piled high with dirty pots and dishes, and the dining table covered in a mess that hadn't been cleaned up at all. I pushed open the door to the guest room. It was filled with clutter, and the bed was covered with their clothes. Quite messy. They were clearly waiting for me to come and be their free housekeeper. I simply poured 2 glasses of water for the elderly couple, then sat on the sofa and ordered some takeout, playing on my phone while I waited. When the food arrived, I called out to my mother-in-law for dinner. Why did it take so long? I'm starving. Mother-in-law stretched lazily, still complaining as she walked out. Seeing the untouched mess in the kitchen and me sitting on the sofa with a table full of takeout, she looked displeased. Caroline, what's going on? Why hasn't any of this been cleaned up? And what's with this takeout? Your dad is sick, and you order takeout for him? No wonder David says you're wasteful. Do you think it's easy for my son to earn money outside? How much did all this takeout cost? Yeah, it's not easy for your son to earn money, but he's not spending it on me, is he? I spend my own money to treat you to a meal, and yet you still bite the hand that feeds you. It's like being a good person only to be insulted. Mom, Dad hurt his leg, not his stomach. Besides, my cooking isn't as good as takeout. You should hurry and eat. I need to leave soon. There's something I need to deal with at work. The old lady nearly blew a gasket when she heard that. You're leaving? I told you to stay and take care of your father for a few months. Didn't you hear me? How can you be such an ungrateful daughter-in-law? Ungrateful? I'm only left with a cold heart. After all these years of marriage, I've cared for them meticulously, always available whenever they needed anything. Cooking and cleaning were the bare minimum. I even took care of the entire house and the elderly. I truly have a clear conscience. My job is a job too, okay? I've already arranged for David to come back. We can't have people thinking he's an unfilial son. Can we? My son earns 30,000 yuan a month. Can you match that? You're making him come back and lose all that money. You're nothing but a spendthrift. Chapter 9. So she knew everything. It turns out they were all in on it, deceiving me together. You were in on this too? So, do you know where he's been spending all that money? My voice was nearly icy, and my mother-in-law shrank under my gaze. But she only grew more self-righteous. My son spends his money where he wants, that's his business. Don't think you can get your hands on it. Besides, Anita was pregnant once. She's beautiful and kind. Unlike you. A useless woman who can't even lay eggs. What good are you? The more she spoke, the more justified and agitated she became. Meanwhile, my heart grew colder and colder. Is that so? Then watch how I take every cent from him. I slammed the door on her, leaving her curses behind. But as soon as I reached home, I saw that the front door was wide open, and David was pacing angrily inside. When he saw me, it was as if he'd finally caught me. And he yanked me over. Caroline, what did you say to my mom? Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to take care of my dad after his fall? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Do you know how upset you made my mom? If anything happens to her, I won't let you off. What a ridiculous line of questioning. And what about you? As her son, isn't it your responsibility to take care of your dad? He gritted his teeth, and when he looked at his phone, it seemed he remembered something else. Why haven't you paid the mortgage and car loan? I've been getting overdue notices on my phone. Is he really that clueless? I seriously doubted my judgment in marrying him. Caroline, I let you live in my house, and you don't even pay the loans? Then get out. He tossed all my belongings out of the house in one go. David, don't bother begging, just get out. Bang, the door slammed shut. Outside, it was pitch black, dragging 4 or 5 suitcases behind me. I booked a nearby hotel. The hotel had a shuttle service, so I sat down by the curb to wait. The nearby street lamp cast a long, lonely shadow on the ground, while in the distance, lights twinkled from countless homes. I felt a deep bitterness, a complete and overwhelming sense of cold and disappointment. But I was no longer sad. It's better to cut ties early. David threw me out of the house. Now I can go to court with no remorse. Chapter 10. David thought I was joking, that I was just trying to scare him. But the court summons forced him to face me in court. He was completely unprepared, hastily hiring a lawyer, assuring him that I was just being unreasonable. But in court, faced with the compelling evidence and arguments presented by my lawyer, he was almost speechless. The court not only awarded me half of our shared assets, but my lawyer also secured additional compensation for me. Whether David liked it or not, it would be enforced by the court. The compensation was even more than what I had asked for in the divorce agreement. David was regretful, but also furious, unwilling to accept the outcome. He filed an appeal, requesting a second trial. Of course, I was ready to see it through to the end, but while I was at work, Anna came to see me first. We met at a cafe near my office. She looked distressed, a far cry from the arrogant woman I'd seen before. After placing our orders, I discreetly started recording on my phone. Caroline, David's been so harsh with me lately. I rolled my eyes. What does that have to do with me? But she continued, speaking as if to herself. He said he's going to take back everything he gave me. Not only does he want to sell the house, but he also wants me to pay him back. Don't you think that's heartless? Without the house, without money, what am I supposed to do? As she spoke, tears began to fall. Caroline, I'm begging you, please don't pursue this lawsuit. We were classmates once, can't you give me a way out? I'm begging you, Caroline. She even tried to reach for my hand, but I quickly pulled away, looking at her with disgust. Caroline, I'm pregnant with David's child. I'm carrying his baby. You and he were together for so many years and never had children. Can't you do this for the sake of the baby? Please, drop the case. Do you think I'm someone who can be easily bullied? Do it for the sake of the baby? How absurd. What does your child have to do with me? Anna, weren't you just bragging about your wonderful boyfriend? That house, you can't afford to live in it. I calmly sipped my coffee, watching as her teary eyes turned into a twisted expression of rage. Caroline, how can you be so cruel? Oh, not at all. I'm just speeding up the divorce so your child can have a complete family. Complete family? Ha, without the house, there won't be any home. I quickly leaned back, avoiding the spit that flew from her mouth in her fury. Caroline, if you don't drop the lawsuit, I'll cause a scene at your workplace. I'll make sure you lose your job. You won't have a moment's peace. I won't let you off. She glared at me with venom, gripping the table as she stood in front of me. Sure, I'll be waiting. I tucked my phone away, feeling quite grateful that Anna had just handed me more evidence on a silver platter. Chapter 11. With the recording in hand, I gained a new advantage in the second trial, solidifying the evidence of David and Anna's affair. Not only that, but I also filed charges against Anna for harassment. I wasn't going to let either of them off the hook. David ended up paying even more money, and Anna spent a few days in a detention center. I heard that the day Anna was released, David beat her up, causing her to miscarry. Anna, in turn, had David sent to jail. The old lady and Anna got into a full-blown fight in the street, pulling each other's hair and clothes, both vomiting and cursing. It was utter chaos. Eventually, the police had to step in to break them apart. It was quite the spectacle, but it had nothing to do with me. I ended up with a significant amount of money, most of which I invested, while the rest I used to treat myself. I signed up for Pilates classes, upgraded my skincare routine, and at work, I achieved even greater success. Bess promoted me along with herself. That day, we booked a restaurant to celebrate. After a satisfying meal, We said our goodbyes, and I waited outside the door for my car. I overheard the manager nearby scolding someone. I turned to look and saw a man bowing his head, nodding repeatedly, almost as if he wanted to disappear into the ground. The manager noticed my gaze and looked up at me. He gave me an awkward, apologetic smile. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am." "No problem," I replied casually. But when the man heard my voice, he suddenly looked up at me, his dark eyes shining. It was David. I excused myself from the manager and went over to talk to him privately. "Here for work?" I broke the ice first. "Yeah, I got fired because of my criminal record. Couldn't find a job, so I'm working as a waiter now." He kept his head down but stole cautious glances at me. That night, I was wearing a fitted black dress, red high heels, and my makeup was flawless. I carried myself with grace. I didn't respond to him. "Caroline, I was wrong." My thoughts were still on the dinner party, wondering if I should transfer to the company's headquarters in the capital to continue advancing my career. "It's all my fault, Caroline. I didn't know it would cost so much to feed a family. Didn't realize the mortgage and car payments were 7,000 yuan a month. I didn't know how exhausting it was to clean the house. I didn't know, Caroline. I was wrong." His voice held a hint of a sob. I had no idea what life had put him through. But wasn't he once a proud man? "Don't call me that," I said, adjusting my long hair and stepping a bit farther away. "There's nothing wrong with being a waiter. After all, I had worked as a housekeeper too. Jobs are jobs. Nothing to be ashamed of. Caroline, it's all my fault. I never really loved Anna. She kept coming after me when she returned to the country, using our past to manipulate me. I was forced into it. Caroline, I've already cut ties with her. Can you forgive me, Caroline?" He spoke to me almost pleadingly, his eyes filled with desperate hope. Suddenly, he seemed so unfamiliar to me. Over the years, the man who had once been a graceful, promising youth had turned into someone selfish and heartless. He was no longer the light that once stayed by my side, comforting me day and night. Forgive him? I stopped blaming you a long time ago. Chapter 12. He looked at me with joy, the light in his eyes seeming to shine even brighter. "Caroline, I knew it. After all these years, you wouldn't just leave me. I stopped caring about you long ago." I smiled calmly, saying this with an overwhelming sense of peace. It was a farewell to the me from over a decade ago. We've known each other for so many years, shared so much, and made so many promises. But as time went by, do you even remember? When I asked you for money, your suspicion and anger were nothing but signs of your mistrust. After all those years together, you actually thought I was a gold digger, that I only wanted your money. You even resorted to that kind of deception, lying to me for 5 years. Getting back with Anna was just a sign that you had lost the spark, the loyalty, and the responsibility in our marriage. Even if it wasn't Anna, there would have been Elisa, Anala, because you are, at your core, an unfaithful man. I don't regret falling in love with that young man from 10 years ago, but I do regret the support and trust one gave you over the past 5 years. We're no longer the people we were when we were young. I won't come running to you just because you wave your hand. David's eyes turned red, and a tear rolled down his cheek, but that tear would no longer ripple through my heart. "No, it's not like that. Caroline, enough, enough." I waved my hand, signaling the end of the conversation. "Caroline, can we start over?" I saw a familiar car approaching from a distance. The man in the car rolled down the passenger side window. "Caroline, I'm here to pick you up." I smiled warmly. "David, you're dirty. Do you really think you're good enough for me?" I walked toward the car, and the man eagerly opened the passenger door for me, carefully guiding me inside. David looked down at his own dirty clothes and disheveled appearance, but I wondered if he understood that when I said dirty, I was referring to him as a person. The car drove off, getting farther and farther away. I wouldn't look back. The man in the car was my new boyfriend. Whether we'd get married, who knows? At least there's still a lot of life ahead.